We left the Saints in Clay County after they had been expelled from Jackson County at the end of 1833. Joseph Smith received a revelation instructing him to recruit men to help redeem the people to their land. So in 1834, Joseph Smith and 200 individuals traveled 900 miles from Ohio to western Missouri. The group was called Zion's Camp. Just as they were facing direct conflict with the hostile Missourians that significantly outnumbered them, a storm swelled the fishing river, which prevented the battle. In its primary objective, Zion's Camp was a failure. Joseph didn't raise as many people as he was hoping, and this small band couldn't put political pressure on Governor Dunklin to act on the Saints' behalf. In a secondary sense, Zion's Camp was extremely successful. The experience proved to be a crucible for the next generation of church leaders. The church turned their attention to political and legal means to gain the right to return to their land in Jackson County. From 1834 to 1836, nothing worked. The good people of Clay County who had been helping the Saints in their time of need were starting to lose patience. The temporary situation dragged on and their resources were becoming strained. A prominent Clay County resident brokered a deal where a new county could be formed specifically for the Saints. They could be politically segregated, Jacksonian democracy preserved. The Missourians could manage their county politics as they see fit, and the Saints could manage theirs. In 1836, Missouri formed Caldwell County. Saints poured in. Most of the Saints coming from Ohio were destitute, which is why they were emigrating to Missouri. Mobs were forcing the Saints out of Ohio. A national recession caused banks across the country to fail. One of those failures was the Kirtland Safety Society, which Joseph had formed. The economic turmoil displaced a lot of Saints, and they looked to Missouri as the place to land. In their poverty, the Saints needed cheap land. Missouri had an enormous amount of unoccupied land, but land couldn't be bought from the federal government until it could be surveyed, and the government couldn't survey the land fast enough. This gave rise to Congress passing a law in 1830 establishing the principle of preemptive rights. An individual who had occupied and improved a tract of public land had the exclusive right to purchase the land once it was surveyed. What's more, they could buy the land at the minimum government price of usually about $1.25 per acre. The city of Far West popped up almost overnight. Before long, it had 150 homes, 4 dry goods stores, 3 family groceries, several blacksmith shops, 2 hotels, a printing shop, and a large schoolhouse. 2,000 Saints were in the area. For a brief period, Far West became the headquarters for the church. Widespread apostasy occurred in Kirtland. Many had rejected Joseph's temporal and spiritual leadership. Under threat of violence, the Lord instructed Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon to abandon Kirtland. They arrived in Far West in March of 1838, but all was not well in Zion. Saints had filled Caldwell County and poured into adjacent counties. The Missourians believed the Saints had violated a stated or unstated agreement to stay within their county. Tensions were building. Some Saints were prepared to defend their rights. A group of Saints formed the curiously named Society of the Daughter of Zion. They are more popularly known as the Danites. This group of men formed a constitution designed for a single purpose: to defend the Saints' rights. In ancient Israel, the tribe of Dan was often identified as the warrior tribe that would defend Israel. The Missourians saw this organization as a threat to the public peace. Groups on both sides inched towards conflict. Feeling threatened and fired by the emotion of an Independence Day celebration, Sidney Rigdon gave a fiery speech. He started out with a patriotic celebration about the founding of the country. Halfway through, it shifted into a militant declaration of the Saints' resolve to defend themselves against ongoing persecution. Missourians believed that the speech was a declaration of war. It escalated tension and conflict. Mobs began to terrorize Saints, especially those living outside of Caldwell County. The Danites forcibly expelled dissident individuals and their families from their communities. They worried that the dissidents would make it harder to defend themselves from the Missouri mobs. In October 1838, rumors spread that the Missouri militia had captured several Mormon men and were planning to execute them. David W. Patton, a member of the Quorum of the 12, led a rescue party of 75 men to free the captives. Early in the morning, on the banks of the Crooked River, a skirmish broke out. David W. Patton ordered a charge, shouting the battle cry, "God and Liberty." The Missouri militia, surprised by the Mormons' swift attack, broke ranks and fled across the river. Patton and his men succeeded in freeing the captives, but 2 Mormon men were killed and several more were wounded. David W. Patton was among them. He would die of his wounds the next day. The battle was a success, but exaggerated reports of the conflict reached Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs. From the one-sided reports, the Mormons were the ones using extra-legal force to terrorize their neighbors. Without exploring the facts, Governor Boggs issued Executive Order 44. The Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public peace. In the bloodiest event of the Mormon War, a mob of 200 Missourians descended on the settlement in eastern Caldwell County called Haun's Mill. There, 30 to 40 families lived. Women and children escaped into the woods. Men and boys sought refuge in the blacksmith shop. After over a half an hour of gunfire, 15 men and 2 young boys were dead. Another 15 were wounded. None of the members of the mob were ever brought to justice. Major General Samuel Lucas brought a militia and surrounded Far West in what has been coined the Siege of Far West. The town was outnumbered 5 to 1. No one could come in or out of the city. The Missourians had another reason to pin the Saints down. This was the week that the Saints would need to declare their preemptive rights. If the Missourians could prevent them from declaring, not only would the Saints have no claim to their land, the Missourians could buy up the Mormon land with its improvements at the base price. Joseph Smith and the other leaders of the church knew that they would need to leave the state. More violence was no longer just a possibility. It was an inevitability. Under a flag of truce, Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, Hiram Smith, Lyman White, and Parley P. Pratt agreed to come out to negotiate the terms of the Saints' evacuation from the state. All of the men were immediately arrested. In the dead of night, the men received a military trial and were sentenced to death at dawn. Brigadier General Alexander Doniphan refused to carry out the order. 60 Mormons would ultimately be charged with crimes ranging from arson, burglary, robbery, treason, and even murder. Under the charge of treason, Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, Lyman White, Alexander McCrae, Caleb Baldwin, and Sidney Rigdon were sent to Liberty Jail.